Hey, Garth, don't you give me no lip. Black and the night was blue. Now on the corner said an ice wagon who bumpers hit loud, somebody scream. You should have heard just what I've seen.
Folks, welcome back inside the Paris Sea Palace, hour number 2 of the Jake Feinberg Show. Just heard from journalist and Playboy Playmate Patty Farmer, and we are in for a real treat here on KEVT Power Talk 1210, Sahuarita, Tucson. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. My guest today is an unheralded swamp bucket, honkabilly, toe-tapping entertainer. He was born in Arkansas and devoured all there was, musically speaking. He toured the southeastern United States, and when he was back home, operated the Rockwood Club, where the likes of Jerry Lee Lewis and Conway Twitty came to play. He took that gospel-infused rock and roll boogie-woogie roots to Canada, where he formed the Hawks, which included Robbie Robertson, Richard Manuel, Garth Hudson, and fellow Razorback Levon Helm. This Mojo Man survived and thrived in the music industry by touring and cutting albums with cats like Duane, Allman, and Pat Travers. He barnstormed North America, playing Maple Leaf Gardens and Madison Square Garden, from greasy strip joints to the Last Waltz on Thanksgiving at Winterland. Ronnie Hawkins, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, it is. Good to hear you, man. And we opened up there with Who Do You Love from...
I heard it. I said, and after that big build-up you gave me, if I ever get a job, I'm going to ask for a raise immediately.
I'll tell you, Ronnie, it was to go back and, I saw the Last Waltz several times, and not for a while, and there's just so many... It was like a turnstile with all the different people coming out. But for you to come out with those guys, knowing that you really put that whole band together, I just wanted to ask you, how organic a process was it? Where Levon came with you, but with Robbie and Richard and Garth, can you talk to the audience about how organic a process it was? How the Hawks came together?
Well, I tell you, we came up here just with the Arkansas bunch, and we played for a while, and 2 of the married boys that had to go back home because of their wives and this and that and the other, I started looking around in Canada for some of these great musicians. Canada has always had some, I don't know why or how, but they've had some of the greatest musicians I've ever seen anywhere. Very few of them, were getting jobs back in those days. In the early days, it was hard for a Canadian to get a record or get airplay in Canada in the 50s in rock and roll. But anyway, as time went on, Robbie Robertson started hanging around us as a roadie kind of, learning, and then we decided to use him. We brought him in, and then with Ricky Denko, he was an apprentice butcher in Simcoe, Ontario.
Oh my God.
And he had a good little band. And I went to look at it, and I thought it was great, and I thought he was great, but he was a guitar player. And I was getting ready to lose in 3 or 4 months, one of my good guitar bass players, Rebel Payne. And so I hired Ricky to come in and rehearse for 3 months, practice with us, and if he could play bass and wanted to, then he had the job because of his personality and looks and all that. And we got him. Richard Manuel I knew before because he had a little band called the Rockin' Rebels from Stratford, Ontario. And we helped them get around a little bit, booked them down in Arkansas in my club, a few other little clubs I know. And then they broke up. And then when the Stan Celeste, my piano player, had to go back to school with his wife and stuff, we hired him. and he came in, and he wasn't near the piano player, of course, that Stan Celeste was, but that's why I hired Garth Hudson to come in and teach. Garth, his reputation was the best there could be for, for musicians. He played the jazz and the classical and all that great stuff, and he was really known in that area for his talent. So we hired him as a teacher player, and within a year, Richard was playing real good.
This is unbelievable. Can you, so you're telling me that Garth, was he playing out, was he playing jazz in a live setting at the Colonial? I mean, did you get to see him play live jazz? How do you know he played jazz?
Well, that he had the band. He had a jazz band.
Wow.
I didn't get to see him ever play anything because we was playing every night. But that was the deal. He played with two bands. His bands, classical and jazz, and his family was kind of jazz, classical, and all. But he had uncles and relatives that played that stuff. And so I told him, and he was a bona fide. He could read and write and arrange, and of course most of us couldn't hardly read the newspaper. So we hired him to come in, and he worked with Richard like an hour or two a day. Then Richard worked on his own an hour or two a day, and then he practiced with us an hour or two a day. So that's about 6 hours sometimes he was putting in. So within a year, he got where he could pump that old stuff out real good. Because Richard was a singer. He had a throat like, I just don't know why he didn't have more hits with the group, the band.
Well, you're right. I mean,
he was the throat, though. He was the voice.
Can I ask you though? Because your sound with the Hawks, would you say that sonically? What did Richard, when he came in, what couldn't he do? And then after being under the tutelage of Garth, how did it expand the music, the sound of the band sonically?
Well, with him really pumping out that really heavy rhythm that you pump out and all the right stuff, and him concentrating, plus practicing every day, he got real good. And then he got where he could sing that stuff. He was the only one in the band. I couldn't sing that Bobby Blue Bland and all that crazy rhythm and blues stuff that I would like to have done. My throat just wouldn't do it. I'd try to sing a song by, by Ray Charles, and it come out like it was Lefty Frizzell or something. But he could do it good and do it well, and it went over. We only did things that would go over to our little audience. That's who we were trying to please, because that was our job. And so he went over real well. His voice, Levon too. Well, the whole band. Robbie got to where he was drawing crowds. The girls, and that would shift over to the other side of the stage where Robbie was playing to see him pick.
Hey, I was watching that last night. I said, "Boy, he really is a handsome devil." Real unbelievable. But I want for the record, because everybody's infatuated with the band, but the band started as the Hawks with Ronnie Hawkins in '64. Can you talk about, especially in the late shows, if you would open it up at all? When I mean open it up, I'm talking about not just guitar solos, but would Garth be, would he have organ solos? How long would the songs be? Would you change the format at all? Or was it a very standard kind of set list?
No, we just did the arrangements, just like we could do them. But Garth was so good on so many things, we started featuring him on a few things. Garth was also a horn player.
Right.
And so when I hired another horn player because of Garth to come in to have the double horn stuff where we could fake the sound of the big band stuff, right? And we were the first band in Canada to do that, and that really shot the boys up another notch because they were really good.
Talking to Ronnie Hawkins here live from Canada. Ronnie, I wanted to go back to you served in the Army. Did you actually serve in war?
No, but the country was safe.
The country was safe. I really want you to.
I didn't go to war. They sent me to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to fight crickets. We fought crickets, and that's all I got to fight.
But let me ask you something deeper than that, because what did you are such a unique case in that you come from Arkansas, and you really were one of the originators of rockabilly, the stage presence, and yet I have to believe that you learned about the one race, the human race, and all the cultural biases fell away in the Army. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, the Army, in the Army is where I put a black band together. But that didn't work in 57, 56, and 7. Outside, we couldn't play a lot of the bars because they wouldn't hire mixed groups.
Right. Can you talk about how you put that band together? That is an amazing story.
Well, it was in the military. They accepted the color, so I put a little group together that was really good. And then we played the non-coms club, the officers clubs, and stuff like that, and little parties on the bass. But then when we would try to go off the bass and play the different bars, a lot of people couldn't hire us because we were a mixed band.
Can I ask you how much of a philosophical fight you would put up, or how did you think that fundamentally, or looking back on it, how did it change you philosophically when you could see this overt cultural bias? I don't really buy into racism because I believe we're all one human race. So how did it?
Me too.
Yeah. How did it affect your point of view? But whether either before the Army or after, to see just this incredible prejudice for no reason other than people looking different.
Well, I tell you, in my home area, northwest Arkansas, that's Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Huntsville, all around there, they didn't have near the prejudice type of stuff that they had, say, further on down south, like Memphis, and then into Mississippi and Alabama and that. They were pretty segregated down there. I mean, they still had to drink in different water fountains. They couldn't sit had to sit at the back of the bus, had to sit at the top of the theater, and it says colored, they called it then. Colored can drink here, and only whites over here. So I got to see all that. It was unbelievable.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of music you were playing with these guys? I mean, that we're really talking about Little Richard, Elvis, the beginnings of rock and roll. I mean, when you did get a chance to play or even practice with that band, what were you channeling?
Well, we practiced a lot because mainly for me, but there's so many great songs out there that the band could play great that I couldn't do, and that's when we put it on Richard and whoever else could get a closer job. I stuck to kind of the rockabilly is what I am, and that's about all I did. But the rest, all the boys, I could get all the boys singing, but Robbie, and I got him whispering. But anyway, Richard Manuel was the one that could really sing the rhythm and blues stuff.
I'm talking about the band you put together in the Army. What was that? What kind of music? Were you playing original tunes at that point, or what were you playing?
So I can't hear. This phone's going off and on.
No, yeah, the band that you put together in the Army in '57. What kind of music were you playing with that band?
Oh, we were just playing the cover things, Buddy Holly and everything that was going on that I could do. Charlie Rich, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, that kind of stuff.
I love it. This is unbelievable. And then here's the question that I've been waiting to ask Ronnie Hawkins for quite some time. When you came back from killing crickets, did you ever join the Chitlin circuit?
No, I never did. I never did play the Chitlin circuit. I'd heard about it, but I went back after the Army to my hometown, Fayetteville there, and I was trying to decide. I had a little band, and that was waiting to be put back together, and I was making a decision because I was staying in school or trying to play, and I got a phone call from Memphis, Tennessee. It was from Jimmy Ray Paulman. Jimmy Ray Paulman was one of the best lead guitar players for rockabilly in Memphis, and he'd been playing with some of the super groups, at that time, the Conway, Twitty, who was Harold Jenkins, of course, back then, and all the great bands, Billie Lee Riley, if you can remember them, a whole bunch of the early rockabillys. And then he called me from there in Fayetteville and asked me if I would take a job with the Memphis recording session boys, the session guys they call them. He and the session guys had put a real top-notch musical band together, and they didn't have a real good, strong front man. So they called me and asked me if I could frontman for $100 a week and all expenses.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
I'd hit the big time. Boy, I told everybody in the state of Arkansas, I guess twice, some of them 3 times, about me getting offered this big job in Memphis. And anyway, I got ready, packed, and it took me 2 days to get there because I went in a 1926 Model T Roadster.
Yeah,
it took 2 days to get there, and some of the roads were even gravel in those days.
You were
anyway, by the time I got there, the band had broken up over who was going to be leader.
Wow.
That's some of them good musician things there they do. So I couldn't go back to Fayetteville, where I told everybody I'm hitting the big time. So I went to Jimmy Ray Palmer's hometown, Marvell, Arkansas. No, not Marvell, excuse me. God, my mind's gone here for a minute. Anyway, they're in Arkansas, and he was going to put a band together. So he had a cousin named Will Pop Jones. He played piano, and he had a little band. He'd been playing around for 2 or 3 years. So we got him, and we asked him about a drummer, and he's the one that found Levon Helm. Levon hadn't played drums professionally, but he played, in high school, and he had such rhythm that he could sit right in. And so we got him, and that's how we got started, and that's the group that we brought to Canada the first trip.
I love this story because Ronnie Hawkins could not return to his hometown after he bragged about the gig that he got in Memphis. And so,
no, I couldn't. I couldn't take the ribbon they gave me.
I'm with you, man. No, this is unbelievable because, okay, I have a couple questions from that. Can you talk to, as a non-musician, Jimmy Ray Palmer, what makes a good lead guitar player in a rockabilly context?
Well, it was a different sound. He just had it down. It was the stuff everybody was trying to pick him. We always tried to describe, I guess, rockabilly. It was a country boy trying to sing the blues and couldn't, and it came out a different way. So you kind of rock it, and it's hillbilly. In fact, they used to call me the hill in Memphis back in 1952 when I was first down there trying to find a job. I didn't find one though, but I was down there trying.
And they were calling you rockabilly already down there at that time?
No, yeah. He said, "Where's the hillbilly? He's rocking. Where's the hillbilly? He's rocking." Then the next thing I know, they're calling everybody rockabilly. And then this Carl Perkins came out with that rhythm he had. I guess that's 55, 56, somewhere in there, and it had that rhythm and everything on it that everybody liked. And so they just everybody either copied him or put their own stuff out or whatever, but that was rockabilly.
Ronnie, how old was Levon when you first met him?
He came down the road at 17.
So
Robbie was 16.
Robbie was 16, but Levon was with you. Robbie was 16 with the Hawks, but Levon was 17 when you were still in Arkansas. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what it was. He was 17, but anyway, his dad said, we were rehearsing in this old radio station, and his dad's name is Diamond, Jasper Diamond Helm. And so he said, well, you boys ain't going to go up there to that old Canada. Canada's worse than Mexico. He said, them Canadians up there in Canada, they'll stick a knife in you for a dime. And Diamond had never been out of Phillips County, Arkansas. And also he said, Levon cannot go anywhere. He can play weekends, but he can't go anywhere until he gets his sheepskin, they call it down there, graduate from Marvell High, because no one in the family had ever graduated from high school.
This is unbelievable. So he wanted his son, but he wasn't opposed to Levon going, though. I mean, as long as he got through high school, he would let him go. He'd give him grief, but he'd let him go.
Yeah.
Can you talk about...
Canada's been the problem.
Can you talk a little bit about... like the kind of trap set, that Levon, I know it seems like a basic question, but he had the most personal rhythm I've ever really heard. A lot of guys talk about it. You can't really describe it. You've called it funky, just a real bluesy, funky feel. But was he coming in to your band with a full-on trap? Did he bring anything new, a new sound to the Hawks?
He didn't even have drums. He didn't use the hi-hat for a year and a half because he'd never owned a set of drums. But he had that natural rhythm that was better than anybody I'd ever seen, and he sat right in and played with Will Pop, just the stuff he'd listened to from here. He was a guitar player. Levon played guitar and sung songs all over the country for the fairs and schools and stuff. He and his sister, they had a little duo, guitar, and she played a wash tub bass.
Wow.
And they booked him everywhere, so he had the rhythm. He had everything. And anyway, years later, he was doing stuff. He copied every drummer that was great, and then learned quick, and he got to be one of the best in the world, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm trying to think about, so you guys locked in musically, but from a vocal point of view, did he was already singing and playing drums fluidly too? I mean, there was no real work on that?
Well, no, he sung songs. You know, some of the songs he could sing good. Like he was singing the stuff really that I didn't sound too good on. Some of the Ray Charles stuff, like What I Say, and a whole bunch of those early blues stuff. He sounded better with his voice than I did with mine until we got Richard Manuel. But Levon had a different, unique voice, and people liked it.
You know, one of the L's on my program is leadership, Ronnie, and you've been a band leader for decades, and you talked about this gig in Memphis, and you get there and it broke up because of a bunch of egos. Can you talk about, in your mind, the qualities of good leadership, whether it's on the bandstand or just in general, if you're going to be a leader? What do you think are some of the qualities that make a good leader?
Well, I tell you, I didn't know nothing about nothing. I just using country boy sense when I'm saying I knew that the more we practiced and the harder we worked, the better we got, and hopefully we could get better jobs. And that's what happened. These boys at that time, back then, so we practiced almost 5-6 times a week, 2 hours. And back then, they didn't mind it. They were learning. We were all learning. And it was actually fun just to practice. It's not like that anymore.
Can you? Well, yeah. I mean, what is it like in your mind today? I mean, I know what you're talking about because you had Ricky Danko didn't even know how to play the bass. Richard didn't really know how to play the piano. So there was a lot of incentive to really woodshed. But what is it like today?
Well, it's the same thing, except today there's so many unbelievable musicians. These kids have got that computer stuff down, you know, where they can see and learn from any musician, any guitar player. My son is a guitar player, and all he has to do is punch in on his computer, and he can see the song and the guitar player that's playing it and slow it down to where he can see what the guitar player is doing. They didn't have anything. All we had was, if you took lessons, they try to teach you classical music. Nobody taught anything but classical music.
Right.
We didn't learn nothing. We couldn't do classical music. We was trying to sing, you know, like Bobby Blue Band or somebody.
Yeah, because I mean, you were making up your own stuff. There's almost a saturation of material out there, and it's much easier to rely on, comping somebody else's stuff. Whereas in the past, you just sort of played and created your own individual sound. But I mean, Ronnie, can you talk? So you have this hard-nosed country boy approach to the practice, to the bandstand. But I mean, can you talk to the audience a little bit about a memorable late-night moment when the crowd got a little rowdy and maybe the band and you and Levon took exception? Was there ever any sort of backroom brawl, that kind of thing?
Oh gosh, we had several. We had several brawls over the years. But the one night in the bars, there was good control. But when we went out to play with some of the kids' shows, you know, that we did on Sundays, whenever we booked them, sometimes, you know, the little gangs would come in and it would start. You know, they'd start throwing pennies on the stage and doing this and that. So we've been in a few wars for sure. That's for sure. I could tell you stories for an hour.
No, I want to know. I want to know who was the most pugnacious. I mean, I was everybody in the band ready to throw down. I mean, I was Garth there. I mean, I can see Ricky Danko and Levon. Who were the guys that were just the guys that said enough is enough? We're going after it.
Well, they all could do it a little bit. Garth wasn't a scrapper much. He was, you know, he was a gentleman and a scholar and all that. And Robbie, he wasn't exactly what you call, you know, getting out there and doing the duking either. Yeah. But Levon, he loved it, and Will Pop Jones and everybody else. It was just a young person scrap is all it was. And we got into a bunch of them in the early years.
Well, we got a game on this program called Name That Tune. Ronnie, I want you to settle in. We got this piece of music, and we'll come back and break it down, okay?
All righty.
Brother.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a story behind that song right there. I just about forgotten about it. That song was written by Doc Thomas and Mark Schumann. Can you remember those names?
I know
they
Doc.
wrote all those hits for Elvis, and Dion, and the Belmonts, and everybody.
Absolutely.
Can you remember those names, or are you too young?
No, Doc Thomas, only because when I've seen interviews with Levon, he always talks about it just the way he talked about it with Jimmy Ray Paulman. So, by the way, for the audience,
they were songwriters and had lots of hits. Doc took a liking to me in New York, where we stayed at the hotel, same hotel. He lived the year round, the week round there, and then he'd go to his farm and wife and everything on the weekends. But he laid around, he stayed in that hotel to get ideas to write. He was a writer, and he was a crippled. He'd had polio or something, and crippled. And Mark Schumann, he was a young boy born in Israel, and he'd come over here and graduate at the top of his class, at that Juilliard and all them big-time schools.
Right.
And so we got to know him pretty good over a year or two. And Doc said, I'm going to write a song about you. It was Arkansas and then another one. I forget what it was. But he was going to go down and put the recording session together and do everything and do it himself. He was going to produce me, Doc Thomas. Boy, that was an honor back then for me. And then it had a bad weather, and it was snowing and ice on the road. And Doc says, I'm not going to be able to go because he's in a wheelchair and on crutches. He said, but I've got a couple of friends of mine going to do it for me. I said, this is bad. Now you just got somebody to do it. I wanted Doc Thomas's name on that record, right?
Right.
Well, who he got for me was Lieber and Stroller. Do you know who they were?
I don't know.
They wrote all the songs for they were a duo for the Fee Fee Fi Fi Fo Fo Fum. Not the Coaster. Was it the Coasters?
Yeah.
But all those hits that they had in a row was written by them. One of the boys just died. I forget which one, but they had them down there, and they were absolutely, one of the best in the studio I've ever seen.
That was off the album Mojo Man, Ronnie Hawkins' leader on from 1964. The name of that track was Arkansas. Can you talk? That was the first time that the Hawks, that amalgamation of the Hawks with Danko, Robbie, Garth, Richard, and Levon were in the studio, I believe. How was that experience recording? I mean, the guys sound, Danko especially sounds in the pocket pretty well, considering he didn't know how to play bass.
Well, he didn't know bass, but Levon knew a lot about a bass. Levon was a gifted musician somehow or another. That little booger, I'm telling you, he could play guitar. He could have been a lead guitar player. In fact, once, when Robbie wasn't quite cutting it good enough, he was just a little bit behind, because I'd had some unbelievable guitar players, Roy Buchanan, boy, he was something else.
Wow. Wow.
And of course, Jimmy Ray Paulman and Fred Carter Jr.
Well, I love Fred. Dude, is he still with us?
Fred's gone.
That dude could really, he could, all the guys had good, go ahead, continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, that's him picking on all the Simon and Garfunkel stuff.
Of course.
All that lead stuff on Bridge Over Troubled Water and all that.
Oh.
That's Fred Carter Jr.
It's ridiculous. Unbelievable. So,
he was unbelievable. But he died last year, I think, and he was my age. He's an old burger.
But Robbie wasn't cutting it, and so Levon was actually stepped in and played lead.
Yes, he did, and I brought a drummer in. I brought Conway Twitty's drummer in to sit in on drums and put Levon on lead guitar and let Robbie practice a little more on rhythm and get stronger. And Levon was a natural. I'm telling you, he played guitar like he played drums. He could play more notes with less notes. He could play more things with less notes than anybody. He could have been a dandy. But drums were the most important thing for us in that band that we could get. So the other kid didn't make it on drums, so we had to put Levon back in. But that time, Robbie was getting stronger and stronger anyway.
Sure. No, I wanted to talk to you about, could you tell me a story of when you crossed paths with David Clayton Thomas?
Oh, yeah. David was a tough kid, and he'd done all kinds of wild things. But we were playing somewhere, and this big, tough kid come up and said, would I let him sit in? And I looked at him and said, boy, this old boy can't sing. He's too tough looking for that. And I said, okay, get up there. And man, he had a throat just exactly like the one I wish I had. He could sing those songs and growl, and he did a heck of a job. And it didn't take him long. I said, you got to get a band together and start doing all your stuff, you know. And that's what he did.
You know, I mean, the backstory on him was that, you know, his dad used to beat him up. And he would eventually one day, as he took boxing lessons, and then he beat his dad. I mean, he was really a tough street kid. But he was
a tough.
Yeah.
I tell you what, we almost had a few little scraps in the bar when he would come in. Some guys would be mouthing off, and they didn't know how tough this cat was. He had a fight with one of the toughest bouncers on Yonge Street, big, black, strong guy. And I think that's when he got half his ear bit off on that one, David Clayton.
Oh.
And but anyway, he ended up, boy, whipping him like a government mule.
I got to tell you, I mean, when you talk about Yonge Street, you know, Ronnie Hawkins, I know you never took a night off, but can you paint the picture of the vibrancy of the different kinds of music that you would see at that time and how you think it affected or helped you expand your musical tastes?
Well, you mean on the strip on Yonge Street?
You know,
the different bands played. One bar up the road, they played Stone Country. And I got to see Carl Perkins. I got to see Lefty Frizzell. Got to see George Jones. All of them great cats there, you know. But they were next door, so I could take a break. When I took a break, I'd go next door and listen to them. Further on down the road on Yonge Street, they brought in the old blues cats like Bobby Blue Band and all that bunch. They were all great. So I'd have to slip down there real quick to hear them to get back before my set started. So I was doing a lot of running on Yonge Street just to hear those groups. Were
cats coming up like Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters from Chicago? I mean, did you get a chance to see some of those, the guys who were singing the blues?
I tell you what, I was lucky enough to see Muddy Waters when he was young, just about. I was a young kid, you know, but when he was rocking. Howlin' Wolf must have been 9 foot tall. He was one of the biggest cats you've ever seen in your life, with hands on him. Looked like he had catcher's mitts on. And then in a throat, he didn't need a PA system. Gosh, you could hear him 3 blocks down the road with that big old strong voice of his. And it was wonderful for me. It gave me chill bumps. A lot of people didn't understand why I liked that music so much. My folks didn't, and everybody else, because they weren't used to that kind of music. But I'm telling you, it was unbelievable for me, and I got to be lucky enough to be right on the bottom and watch it come up stronger and stronger every year.
Who do you think, out of anyone that had an impact on you as an entertainer? I mean, every time I'm seeing you in a live setting, you're just having a ball and you're making sure everybody's involved and you're truly up there and you have a stage presence. Can you identify cats that you saw in Canada when you first got up there that really, really you were like, you know, I'm gonna beg, steal, and borrow a little bit of that and then put my own accent on it?
Well, in Canada was a little behind, in my opinion, from the States. But they hadn't started even playing rock and roll much. Very few stations that I know of would play a rock and roll song. And none was getting played. And there wasn't a Canadian band, and a Canadian band, you know, just couldn't get a job hardly for some reason. The club owners were that old school saying, we want acts from America. And I said, well, if things had been that good down there, I wouldn't have left. But anyway, that's how it started, and so some of those bands had it tough. But anyway, what I finally figured out, these bands that I thought was really good, I could name you half a dozen, I would tell the club owners that these are a southern group, southern Canada, I didn't say where in the South, and I'd loan them my car, they'd get booked, and they'd pull up to the club in that Arkansas Cadillac, unload and pull out, and they'd go over good. And it took them 2 or 3 times going in before they told them they were Canadians. And that happened in a dozen places.
So you had a Cadillac with Arkansas plates in Toronto, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I had to hide it in the daytime to keep them from repossessing it.
Can I? So I'm gonna go. I want to know about some of the, like Lenny Bro. Lenny Bro was a legitimate Canadian cat.
Oh my gosh, Lenny Bro was a picker.
He was a picker, man. Like, you know, Gordon Lightfoot, great folks. I mean, there was so many, and there was this sort of, idea that somehow they just couldn't cut it. And here, Ronnie Hawkins going against the grain. Can you tell the story of how did Levon get his diploma and just hop in the car and go? How did that first trip to Canada work out that he just wanted to come?
Well, you just said something about Gordon Lightfoot. So you kind of twitched me off. I'm doing a thing right now with Gordon. Gordon Lightfoot is producing me in a few days in Toronto, doing one of his songs called "The Pony Man."
Oh,
it's a story. It's a bedtime story. I said I don't sell enough records to pay for the liner notes, but it's for your grandkids. In my case, great grandkids, and it's a lullaby called "The Pony Man," and we're doing. I'm learning it today, and he's going to produce it next week sometime.
Well, I talked to Gordon maybe a year ago, and he still uses a tape recorder. He doesn't even use he still uses a typewriter. The guy is, the fact that you guys are collaborating and carrying on that lineage is fantastic.
I talked to him 3 times yesterday. We're trying to figure out the best key for me to sing "The Pony Man" in. 40 years ago, I'd been in the key of A, but now the mellowed out so much, I'm down 2 or 3 keys lower. So we're going to rearrange it where I can hit the notes okay.
All right, we got another piece of music for you, Mr. Hawkins. So just settle in and we'll come back.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. This phone is going crazy.
We're going to put in a piece of music here and we'll come right back.
All right.
What do you got for us, brother?
On that story, that's a good one, too.
No, you tell this.
That was cut in Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
Yeah.
For Atlantic, Jerry Waxler and Tom Dowd, who at that time had the reputation of being the best producers in the world, I guess, especially for rhythm and blues.
Absolutely.
And I got to run around with them for a couple of weeks and met some of the greatest musicians. And then we called in. I'd met Duane Allman a few years before when he had a little band together, but it wasn't the Allman Brothers. It was called something else. And at that time, we had a song out called "Southern Love." And those little bands in the South, when they were young, that was on their song list to play in the South. And so we brought Duane Allman and Duck Dunn. Do you know who Duck Dunn is?
Donald Duck Dunn, baby. Oh, yeah. Big
Duck
time.
Dunn, a great bass player from Memphis with the Booker T and the MGs, and the funniest guy in the world, man. So those two were there, and then all that rhythm section for Muscle Shoals, these young guys, and they'd had a band together, and they used to do Southern Love, they said. So it was really, really a fun time for me to meet everybody, hear those stories from Jerry Waxler, and how Tom Dowd put all that stuff together. And I'm telling you, it was one of the best weeks I've ever had. I didn't go to it prepared. I thought they had the songs for me to learn and do down there, but it wasn't. Atlantic was right in the middle of selling. They were selling Atlantic to that big company that bought everything there for a while. I can't remember who it was, but so everything wasn't quite the same. Everybody knew they only had a job for another year, and then they're gone. So, but Jerry Waxler and them hung in there, and then I went with them and stayed with Jerry down in Miami. It's in Florida. They had a studio down there, and I got a second album, I guess, there. But I stayed with Jerry there, and they were getting ready to record Aretha Franklin. And boy, I'm a fan of Aretha Franklin, always have been, and always have been. But anyway, they let me stay over another week to hear her sessions, and I stayed there at Jerry Waxler and heard all those great stories.
I was going to say the name of the band that Duane was in was called the Hourglass, and
that might have been.
No, it was
I can't remember nothing anymore. I just barely can remember anything.
Oh, you're doing much better. That you're give yourself a little bit of credit. You're doing a heck of a job. I was going to say that I was afraid that it's funny. You look at the Swampers, David Hood, and then of course the drummer Roger Hawkins. And those cats really. I mean, they
were good.
I mean,
I was looking at some of the stuff. It was filmed. A lot of it filmed, and I saw a recent thing on Muscle Shoals, and the thing, I wouldn't have recognized anybody. They all got as old as I did. Boy, but they were just young and hot. Roger There's a lot of stories I could tell you, but it'd take all day, and I'm giving out. I can't take it too long. My old body's wore out.
I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you about this. You've been very dedicated to schizophrenia and committed to helping people with that disorder. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I'll tell you a story there, and then I'm kind of giving out, so you can call me back again when I'm rested.
We'll do it. No,
we'll continue.
We'll say one more story. One more story.
But my son is schizophrenic, Ronnie Jr. He would have been, without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the greatest guitar players there ever was, because he had all the teachers. He had the Robbie Robertsons, he had the Roy Buchanans, he had the Fred Carter Juniors, and all these great cats that would come in and show him and play. So by 14 years old, he was really, really, really good. And then all of a sudden, he went in his room, and we didn't hear him practicing like he usually does. And then he didn't come out of his room for a while. So we thought, my gosh, he might be on drugs or something, from the school. But that wasn't what it was. He was just starting to be schizophrenic. Took us a long time to find out, because they didn't have the word schizophrenic anywhere, hardly back then. And now it's everywhere, and you can talk about it forever. But we tried everything, putting him in places, and it didn't work. He's best now at home. He's happy. He listens to music all the time, but he helps his mama, and she couldn't make it without him.
Is there a foundation in Orlando that you support a lot? I was reading about.
Oh no, I played for everything I could for the. I think that's why they gave me the Order of Canada, is because I played for so many charities, because I figured you're paying back, for Canada. Canada is a promised land, paying back for all the free medicine and stuff you got up here. My gosh, Canada, without a doubt, is the promised land.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you. And from Tucson, Ronnie, I look forward to doing part 2 with you, man. I really appreciate you spending time on the Jake Feinberg Show today and breaking it down for us here.
Well, I tell you what, anytime you just let me know next Saturday or whatever, and you get up and listen, because I know a lot of stories, because I've been around. I was trying to make it in 1952. Someone asked me once, said, Ronnie, you was in Memphis in 1952? I said, yeah. He said, well, what was the best job you ever had down there in 1952? I said, the best gig I got was I only had to buy one round of beer for the band to let me sing one. That was my best job. And that's a true story.
Well, no, I want you to bring a full barrel of stories next time we talk and be ready.
All right. You line it up with my wife, Wanda, and this is a pretty good time for me. I start to get tired right now in the afternoon. I'm pretty good in the mornings.
You were cooking, man, and I got to tell you, you made it through the storm you guys are having up there. I'm glad we got the reception to come through okay.
Oh, I am, too, because I was worried about that when everything went off. All of electricity went off. I said, man, the phones ain't going to work, and this interview's going to be messed up. But we got through it somehow, and we'll do it again just as soon as we can.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, and keep rocking, and remember, the big time is just around the corner.
Love you, buddy.
It's a long corner.
Oh, I know. It's
Thank
long.
you.
I'm there, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, babe. Thank you.
Be good. We'll be right back.
Up in the evening when the sun is sinking low, standing there waiting for the whistle to blow. Sitting in a TV building right on the tracks, rolling their bones until the foreman gets down. Pick up your belongings all scattered about. We got a long schedule train coming to my side. Everybody screaming and a jumping around, picking up the money and the ticket